Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Greg McCord, founder and CISO of McCord Keystone Advisory and CISO at lightcast.io. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? CyberLink sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time, so you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after. Learn more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Greg, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Lightcast and your role there as CISO?
Yeah, Lightcast is a leading labor market analytics firm. So we deal with a lot of data. We get a lot of data from different sources. And what we do is we take that information and really provide a good, trustworthy source of that market analytics. And one of our latest pieces, fault lines, is kind of exemplifying the changes in the labor market. Right? We're seeing with AI, we're seeing now with the war with Iran, like how does that impact these certain different types of things? And that may not be brought up explicitly, but we dive into that world of our changing labor market. So, and of course, as a CISO, I had to protect all the data, the infrastructure, and everything that exists there. And as other CISOs may mention in their world, it's a lot of work to do. So,
Fair enough. Well, I also want to, I've got a number of questions from that, but I also want to touch, kind of touch on the McCord Keystone Advisory. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do there is get, some type of fractional CISO type work in front of companies that can't necessarily afford a CISO, if you will, right?
Yeah.
I bring a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise from my past work, from government, public, private, you name it. And I believe I can give back a little bit more on top of my CISO work at Lightcast to companies that really just want to enhance their security now.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. And it is definitely something that smaller businesses really need help with, right? They may get it from their, I mean, if maybe a little bit from their internal IT, but they're so busy and that's not their expertise. And then if they outsource it to an MSP, that's not really their expertise. Then they go to an MSSP, and that's kind of their thing, but it's not really, and they're spread too thin. So having
Yeah.
that vCISO that's really focused on them, brilliant. How
Yeah,
long have you
and
been doing that
and
for?
well, I just kicked off the company late December, and I've kind of been it was a soft launch, and I'm kind of getting my feelers out there. And I started it because I had friends that were asking me, "Hey, Greg, can I have some help?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure, why not?" So now it's formalizing that give back and help into a company.
Yeah.
And I'm building out a bench as well as with a lot of technical and people that are much smarter than I am. Because I realize at the speed at which everything is developing today, I may or may not keep up.
Yeah.
I like to say that I can, and that's probably not good from a professional perspective, but I'm only one person, right? And there's only so many hours in a day. So it makes sense to plus that up.
Yeah. Now that's brilliant. And it is definitely something that's needed for small businesses. So good luck there. I think that's a really worthy cause, especially in today's day and age. And I want to kind of I'm going to get into that in a little bit here because I've already got a bunch of things I want to talk to you about now. But switching back to Lightcast, I think this is really interesting. And obviously, you're the CISO, not the data people, but I think it's really kind of fascinating how, if you could explain a little bit more about how that data is derived, and specifically when you start talking about like labor data, right? Labor statistics. Right? I think historically we've all kind of relied on the government's data to come out and say, okay, this is where the labor market is now. This is the unemployment rate. So how does that differ, and what is it that you guys are able to, kind of, what gaps are you guys able to fill in, and how?
Yeah, and I think that's important to call out that the government data is still important data. It's a good source of truth. And a lot of that data is used to kind of fill in the gaps, make the rough edges a little bit smoother, right? Which makes sense. But where our value really gets to is the entities that leverage Lightcast in our analyst product and some of our other products is it provides additional insight specific to the things that they're looking for. Let's say if it's an educational institution, they want to know how their alumni are doing after graduation, right? So what markets are they going to? And do they have jobs, for example, right? So it's a matter of like understanding all the nuances that we don't necessarily think about ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, and I can go on through some of the other products. I
Yeah.
probably could, but I do want to save time for the show.
Yeah, yeah, no, that gives us a really good idea. Okay. So it's interesting, what's going on, today, and I'll just make this, let's just get timely. I mean, as right now it's March 20th. This episode will
Hmm?
probably come out and around the end of March as people see
Yeah.
it. And there's I think a lot that's going on in the world now, with the conflict in the Middle East with Iran. And we've already seen things like the striker breach. I think
Yep.
that was, I think that's really instructive and informative for people in that it hopefully opens people's eyes a little bit more to the fact that we really do need to start leveraging AI more on the cybersecurity side. Here you've got a business that is a massive player, multi-billion dollar business that obviously invests in cybersecurity, is obviously doing the right things. I mean, much like MGM, right? If
Hmm?
anybody's, they've
Yep.
got enough money, then they're using it wisely. But once you integrate a little bit of social engineering, that's they bypass a layer. There has to be other layers in place. And I'm getting to a question and a point here, but I think that when it comes to AI and cybersecurity, we see things like Darktrace, for instance. Darktrace, the way they use AI in email identity, and we'll just apply it to Striker since we're talking about that. Something
Hmm.
like that, where you've got a product that is actively looking at all of these identities and says, "Wait a sec, this isn't right," and can quickly shut that off and then call for an adult and say, "Hey, look, this didn't look right. I shut this down. Tell me if this is right." And sure enough, things like that end up saving the day in cases like this. And I think it's I think you cannot bring a knife to a gunfight. And I think
Hmm.
the bad guys are starting to use AI guns. We know they are. It's not, I don't think
Yeah.
we've
It's already
seen it
there.
time and time again. They're there. They're coming with guns. And I think the um traditional security products are the knife in this analogy. And so we can't give up knives because sometimes it's close quarter combat and okay, this analogy is about to get real gross, but let's not get too gross. But I think that there is a need, I think, now on the security side that everybody should be focusing on things like that to integrate AI in the right way, in a smart way on the security side. And curious, what is your take on that? What is the sage advice, here in March of 2026? Because AI is not flawless, but
Hmm.
we're they're bringing
There.
AI to this fight. So what do you do?
Yeah. Uh, if I went 100% CISO, I would say no, right? But I know I can't do that, right? And what I mean by that is if we don't leverage AI, we're going to get left behind, right? So your average CISO, and I'll talk about Iran and threat actors in a second. The average CISO needs to incorporate that into their daily life cycle. Now, what I would encourage and caution as well is to be non-attributable as possible, right? Because as soon as you link confidential data and you're not ready for it, it's gone, right? You've lost positive control of that data. And that's tough because you can't recover from it. You can send cease and desist and yada yada yada, but I mean, how many times has it been copied before you get the original back, right?
Yeah,
So it's
for
gone.
sure.
And when I think about our adversaries using AI against us, I think that exemplifies that fact that we need to leverage those tools as well to bolster our capabilities. And going back to the knife, I think the knives are very, very important because that was our starting point. We got data, we got all kinds of good information, telemetry from those tools, Now let's make it better. Now it's optimized. Let's get rid of bottlenecks. So when that thing does happen, let's say they try to get in, whatever it's a misconfiguration, social engineering, business email compromise, right? Now we can quickly turn back and say, I blocked it,
Mhm.
right? Well, or maybe the tool will for me, you know?
Right.
But it's something, it's a capability, it's an increase in capability, protecting your organization, protecting yourself, because the one thing we haven't talked about is yes, you're attacking a corporation, you're attacking a company, but there's also people's lives at stake, whether they get publicly branded, right? Or publicly, sorry.
Yeah.
I we just haven't talked about that much. And I think that's something that could pop up. I hope it doesn't, but I want to make sure that everyone's covered.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a really, I think you bring up some really interesting points. And I
Mhm.
think when you kind of split AI into the kind of the machine learning tools in security and
Mhm.
the LLMs that people are bolting onto let's just say LLMs in general, right? Because I think the challenge becomes now when people hear AI, they think LLM and they immediately think, well, hold up. That when you bolt that onto your, let's say, traditional email security gateway, right? Now you've given that, you open yourself up to prompt injections. It's just inherent
Mhm.
in it, and we haven't solved that yet. And so I get it from a business perspective. If I'm running a security email gateway, great. Just just chuck, slap on Chat GPT onto this thing, and now we've AI powered it.
Yeah.
No, you haven't. You've opened up a huge can of worms, and it's a real problem. And I think when you use things like machine learning in the right way in your security products, now it's that next level beyond. Hey, we set up a rule. The bad guys find a way around it. Great. Now you're using AI in the right capacity, in the right way. Just like I think with an LLM, you can use it in the right way or the wrong way. You give it
Yeah.
access to your email and your credit card and the web, and no guardrails, and you're going to have all kinds of problems. I mean, that's just the reality. You send it out and you give it broad instructions, and it goes, and suddenly you've got a Porsche arriving in your, in your driveway that you didn't know you ordered, right? So all kinds of crazy things there. But I do think it's, we're at that stage where we have to manage it, not just from a don't get left behind standpoint, but
Mhm.
how do we say when somebody shot us, we were like, but we have the best, we have a sword. Most everybody was using a knife.
Right.
Yeah. It's that Indiana Jones, clip, right? He's there with the sword and he just pulls out the gun and shoots him. And that's, I think, part of the challenge is balancing that, like finding the right products, and not to be a dark trace, like just to, I think it shows us the way, of the future, right? Using AI, like, and for them specifically, machine learning in those ways with identity, with email, with all these others. Cool. I think
Mhm.
that just like self-driving right now, you can kind of see that where the future's going. You can't trust it. You might die if you do. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah.
Your insurance will definitely go up if you fully just trust it. Um, but it's this interesting thing where people get lulled into this sense of security, like,
Yeah.
oh, it works. And just like with your LLMs, it did such a great job on drafting that email. Let me just not worry about it when I have it write this proposal
And
or
the
this.
next one, and then the next one, and then you automate it, right? And then it's
Yep.
like, oh, well, that's, but by the time you get to number 20, it's made a mistake,
That's
right?
right.
And
Yeah.
and then like, what do? You already sent it, you automated it, you can't pull it back, right?
Nope.
So yeah, it's definitely going back into that hallucination.
Yep.
The Yeah. So yeah, that's tough. And I think about, when you were talking about that information, I pulled up some quick things on the side, and I said, wait a minute. Well, this is where AIUC-1 comes into play. So they're building up a comprehensive, robust AI framework that talks
Mhm.
about prompting specifically, talks about the agents, talks about the LLMs, and there are a number of companies out there that leverage this technology. Why not have a framework that comprehensively addresses all those things that pull in like your ISO 42001s, your CSA Maestro, which is what they're trying to do as well. So a lot of good people are doing a lot of great things. Emil and Ravi over at AIUC-1. You've got I can't think of his name, but over at CSA, who just he keeps posting a lot of good information in white papers talking about this topic specifically. Is like, how do we address the prompt?
Yeah.
Because everything, like, yeah, you connect the integrations, but you got to get it to move and do something, right? You
Yeah.
prompt it to do something. It's almost like talking to your kids. You ask the right questions to get the right response back. You probably be surprised sometimes about the responses you get back and like, why are they asking that type of question? I literally sat here and thought about this yesterday when I was talking with one of my little ones. I'm like, huh, this is literally like AI prompting. I never thought of it that way.
Yep. No, it really is. You have to, and I tend to think of it as like a an intern. Look,
Hmm.
it might be a high school, might be a college intern. You've got to give them really clear instructions. You're going to have to educate them. You're going to have to supervise them, and
Hmm.
in time, they may become a good employee that requires less supervision, but still requires supervision. And we're
Yeah.
not at that point, I think, in the clearly visible future that you're going to just be able to fire and forget. Like that's just that's it's too early for that. It's going to
Yeah.
happen one day probably,
I don't
but
see it. Yeah, not yet. Not yet.
right, not yet.
Is it plausible? Yes. Are the right people making it possible? Maybe.
Yeah.
And I think, security leaders have to make sure that we're raising that voice, we're raising those red flags to make sure that say, look, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Even though business leaders say, well, I want to because I can scale my business exponentially X. Well, that's possible, but what happens when you get a breach?
Mhm.
Then you got to stop and go back, disconnect. Hopefully, that'll be tough, right? So all the repair and fixing
Yeah.
is going to take a lot of money.
Well, and I think part of what we're going to see, just kind of putting on my futurist hat, and it's
Yeah.
not that much future, it's just like maybe binoculars or a telescope here looking just a little bit into the future. I think
Mhm.
what we're seeing in terms of hardware improvements, and I think Apple is a great example of this with the new, M5 Ultra. What we're going to see, I think, is the power is going to be brought to the desktop to the point where you can have your LLM running locally, keep that secure. And I think it's going to become a lot more affordable for SMB to have their data securely, positioned inside their organization with no additional like uh-oh breach type level other than what you'd normally have, right? You've got it all in SharePoint or whatever now.
Yeah.
Cool, but having that locally on your own hardware, I think adds to the level of safety for the SMB and even the enterprise to be able to bring that in and secure that more readily. And there's a lot that has to go into place, I know, before you can say,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
To
safe
think
there.
about it.
There's a
Yeah.
lot, right? Yeah, you could see the wheels turning. There's a lot that has to go in there, but a lot of that can be kind of baked into it. And I think we see that in the difference between like an open claw, which is just, let me just go as far forward as I can and just, fail as quickly as possible, versus things like Claude Cowork, where now you've got the same sort of capability, but it's safeguarded, it's there, it's asking for, security was designed in from the beginning, and now it's not just open and free for all, but you've got a much more controlled and secure version. So I think there's that balance. And I think we'll see companies like Anthropic kind of doing the right work to put security first
Hmm.
versus, and I'm not picking on Open Club, but that's what they're doing is just to get out there as quickly as possible and be as open and be as fast to, but that comes with so many security issues that I'm curious to see if it flops because it becomes too dangerous and you can't secure it when it's running that fast. And too many people are going to, kind of, whoa, I can't mess with that because there are so many security issues. So it'll be fun to see that play out. But I don't know. I digress. I think that's really exciting to see, but
It
bringing
is.
that into the business, I think that's what we'll see. And I'm curious if that, from your perspective, if that's something where once the hardware and the software and everything is all within your control and the confines of your network, how do you feel about it then? At that point, is it something like, you know what, I feel a lot better about this versus it just being out on that cloud that they say is secure, they say it's separate. I gotta believe them because I've no way of knowing other
Mhm.
than they said it was. Like, how can you prove it? How can they can't. They're not.
Yeah. And I keep thinking about, philosophically, what is AI? I mean, obviously artificial intelligence is the actual acronym and you spell it out that way. But how are we leveraging it today? Us on a personal side, a lot of folks still use it as, a question and answer like a, more advanced Google. Within an organization, you have it checking code, but it needs access to do so. Or you're building up, notifications, a number of use cases, which I pretty cool stuff, right? It helps optimize and makes you a little bit more productive. But the flip side is it's making you productive, but then you're losing that creative value, which we haven't seen a lot yet, but it's going to happen,
Right.
right? So you're taking the creativity value out of the equation. But, going back to what I was kind of driving towards on the philosophical side, like, is AI more of a surface account with an avatar and a brain, right? Like it's like we're giving that
Yeah.
surface account a body, and it's got this body of knowledge behind it, right? And then it's doing the things you want it to do, right? And I've heard people call it identities. I've heard folks call it software, and I'm like, I don't think we understand holistically yet
Yeah.
what we want it to do. And I think that's part of the issue. But yeah, going back to what you were directly asking me, would I feel more comfortable in that case once we've secured it, put the guardrails in place, protected the prompt, protected the agent to agent communication, the agents prompting each other, which is also an interesting concept. Like, if we can secure that, I would obviously feel a lot more comfortable.
Mhm.
Just like when businesses went to the cloud, how did we get assurance that our information would be protected, the physical data center, et cetera, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
the same idea there.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good analogy. And I think we all went through it and we're like, okay. And now the benefits are very clear.
Yeah,
It's, I'm not sure how one really you can't really work without it now. The cloud is everywhere,
yeah,
and it's super beneficial. And I think that's a great analogy because I do think AI in all of its forms will be the same. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think in that interim, the where we are today and what we have to do in terms of that whole knife fight versus gun fight, type analogy. I mean, you look at McKinsey. I don't know if you saw this. Just I think it was earlier this week, might have been last week. They
mhm,
had a red team using this AI, and I think it was AI Works. I think is the name of the company. I could be wrong on that one, but it they did and it was all AI, and it took them about 2 hours to find and exploit these vulnerabilities that they had, to date not known about, and we're able to safely, extract a ton of data and everything. But it was, it was the good guys doing it. So that's great. But I think
mhm,
that's a great example of using AI in a great way, to beat the bad guys at it, right? So
yep,
using AI to harden your defenses and find the vulnerabilities, I think that's a fantastic way. Um, and I'm kind of curious, your take is, are those things that people should be looking at now, especially the larger companies? I get it. Small companies, like, come on, that's a little bit of overkill. But when you start talking about the Chases, the Bank of Americas, the big targets out there,
mhm,
almost every enterprise now, and most medical companies, they are huge targets. And we've seen, what is it, like a 250% increase since the conflict started in
yeah.
cyber attacks. And so,
Especially because the critical infrastructure, yeah, and the things that help protect the masses, right?
mhm,
So our adversaries want to make it harder, in general across everywhere. So how do you cut off access to money? How do you cut off access to resources, energy, all those types of things? And we haven't talked about the other things, like what happens if you turn off a stoplight
yeah.
downtown? I mean, has it happened, or am I just thinking of a bunch of movies at the moment? But when I start thinking like an attacker, I'm like, well, how do I make that life much harder on the citizens that are attacking me?
Yep.
And there are a number of ways you can do it. And I think it's just scratching the surface. And, the larger companies, leveraging AI to help. I mean, a lot of these big companies have really good processes in place, right? Now it's just a matter of going back to my earlier point, like leveraging AI in a non-attributable way, tongue twister, and using it to increase productivity, right? And then as you're working through it, we talked about securing models and LLMs, right? You can hold that locally, but you can firewall the crap out of it, right? And then maybe using that at a larger company to scale whatever you need to scale. All those
Yeah.
alerts come in 250x. I'm sure their SOCs are trying their best to stay ahead of it. You can't default deny because you still have to run a business, right? A multi-billion, per hour business for some of these large organizations. So you have to keep that going.
Yep.
So how do you protect the access? Okay, let's plug something in that we've vetted ourselves. We've made sure is safe to the best that we could tell,
Yeah.
right? It's separate from everything else. So we know it's there, but it's doing all the hard work for me.
Yeah.
It's clearing through all that clutter.
Yep. No, I think that's really, really key. And I'm gonna go right back to your cloud analogy. I think that's so spot on because it's that same sort of adoption. You can't just
Mhm,
jump right in and do it. You've got to be smart about it. You've got to examine what you're doing, apply it to your organization. No two organizations are the same. And
mhm.
so there isn't a one size fits all. I don't think there's one security product that can work for everybody. That doesn't even make sense. It's a ludicrous concept. But I think there's I think that that idea of integrating the AI and the right kinds of AI in the right places
Mhm.
is where the future is when it comes to security. Just like cloud was the future, it's now AI. But how do we traverse this, and how do we guide our organizations in that direction? Because we certainly can't sit by the sidelines and be like, I love my Windows XP and Server 2008. We're staying right here, folks. Obviously, can't do that
Some people
because
still got it. So
they do. God bless them. But but you can't run your whole organization like that anymore. At one point, that was the cutting edge. That was great. You were doing great. But then along came the cloud, and along comes AI. And I think you're right. And I think it'll be really interesting because now as the government is talking about putting out mandates on using AI and how we're to use it for security, I think there's a lot of mixed reviews right now about the administration and the competency in this and whatnot. So that's going to come with mixed reviews
yeah.
but I think back to your earlier point of there are people who are working on the frameworks. I think that pushes everybody in the right direction when you have the government saying, look, we need to be focused on it because our adversaries, we know they're coming at us and they're coming at us hard using AI. So how do we protect the country as a whole? Hey, we need you to start adopting this in ways too. But then that's a funny one because the government can't say everybody must use XYZ product. Not allowed to do that. So that doesn't work. That would cause more problems anyway, even if they did. So I think the frameworks are the way, and it'll be really interesting to see how that all pans out. Um, so
Yeah, and kind of adding to that point, like one of the very first questions I was getting asked by my executive team was like, what is it? How broad is the scope of this? Are there guardrails we could put in place? So those are the questions I was hearing from many folks, right? And what the frameworks are doing is saying, okay, we've done extensive research. Here are the areas that we need to lock down. And but we're still asking ourselves the questions when we're developing these frameworks, like what are the things that we don't know that we should know?
yeah,
Right? And we're reaching out to people that are in the field that are, constantly playing with LLMs, the agents building orchestrated multi-agent platforms on their own. Like, what are things that you're seeing that we haven't necessarily looked at? And I
yeah,
think that's key. And if we have that feedback loop constantly in there, we get back in the continuous monitoring phase of this, then the frameworks are going to get that much better.
yeah,
Now it's the point of you have the framework. Do we go the traditional method of okay, let's plug it into our GRC platform. We have it. Now let's gather the evidence. Hmm. That's a very tedious process, right? And you're already too late because you need something that's going to be able to plug in. You pull the controls, it does the configs. Maybe you can use AI to do that, but
it's
but
like
but
getting a place,
but without breaking something, right? So
right?
that's always going to be the cost benefit is like, what can you do with what you have?
Yeah.
And you have to operate at the speed of your business.
Yeah. No, and that's the real challenge, right? Because right now we have never seen anything advance as quickly as this. And to keep up on the kind of when it comes to policy, procedures, uh, frameworks, how when by the time you finish even discussing it,
Hmm.
it's now advanced beyond
Already
that.
changed.
So
Yeah.
you've got to be looking so far down and so strategically and generally and wisely. That's a tough job because
Yeah. And I, I, I was kind of on the fence of bringing this up or not, and that was
do it.
up another technology, and that was something that we've kind of forgotten about for a couple of years, and that's quantum computing. That,
Yeah.
that's not gone either, right? So,
Nope.
because when you talk about the changes in technologies over the last 20, 30, 40 years, you're talking about on-prem giant data centers. You have most people that have servers in their closets and their businesses. Now that's transitioned to data centers. Now data centers have transitioned to other people's data centers, what we call cloud. So you have that kind of mixture. Now you set the stage to scale infrastructure exponentially, right? So companies jumped in, they built their own products, they built out of that, and those infrastructure providers gave them the tools. So now, what about the change in the underlying capabilities within computing itself,
Yep.
right? Instead of just binary ones and zeros, well, what about a qubit?
Yep.
Let's get into four transitional states and say, okay, well, how fast does that speed up, our processing time? And once folks really start to figure out what that means and they start to implement it, if they get it to work, now what does that mean for AI? Because now we have these LLMs that we're training today. And by the time this catches up to that, it's going to be an interesting convergence.
It is. And is that where potentially AGI, comes out of that?
Mhm.
Um, maybe that is where we get the super intelligence. At that point, it can process and think so much faster and iterate so much faster that whether it develops it or iterates it and just happens upon it, you know, um, I regardless, it now
Yeah.
at that speed, it's going to be a game changer. And then you talk about all the old data is just up for grabs. So,
Mhm.
what people are out there collecting now, and by people, I mean governments, as they go out and they collect up, breach data now that's encrypted, doesn't matter. They don't need to decrypt it now. In the future, once they've got, quantum computing, they can crack the old stuff and know, well, now I'm an old Intel guy, and so it's interesting because when it was funny, I'll tell you an old Army story. When I was an interrogator back in the day, I got to work as an interrogator at the Survival Evasion Resistance Escape School, the SERE school, in for special forces, and it was really interesting because one of the things you want to teach people is really just resist until the point where your information is no longer relevant, right? Once you get captured, the battle is moving forward. And what do you have? 72 hours worth of data. By then, anything that hopefully everything has moved on, and then you're fine. Then talk. So how do you resist for that 72 hours? And I'm hopeful that a lot of this data that has happened in been collected in breaches that it wasn't encrypted. Hopefully by the point that by the time we get quantum computing, fine, you've cracked it all, but it's all irrelevant data. I don't know. Some of it's I don't know. It's interesting because then you get into the whole issue of privacy and identity, and it's all now people are like it's all out there. What do I have to? Okay, like
But is that the right mindset to have? Oh, it's
is
already out
it
there. Like,
exactly?
no, it's not the right mindset to have. The right mindset to have is, okay, well, how do I protect my data? How do I protect my identity, my physical identity, which is becoming bits of data, right? So how do I
Yeah.
protect that?
Yeah. And you know what? Interestingly, I think we're also in for an interesting future on how do you verify that that is you? How do you verify that that was, whether it's even in a video call right now,
Mhm.
AI is getting to the point where, well, that might not be Greg, that might not be Matt, that could be anybody speaking. There's enough information about either of us that this could all be created by AI in real time. So how do you verify that?
Yep. And just us having this video in public, posting it publicly, now you can leverage platforms to copy it, right?
Mhm.
and then put you somewhere else. So it's just, yeah, interesting.
It's going to be a fun future. Obviously we could spend forever theorizing and thinking about it. But
Mhm.
when it comes to actual practical terms today, I think you're spot on that you really have to consider it for your organization. What does it mean? And be smart about it. It can't just be great. Go use whatever LLM you want, ask it whatever you want. It's free if you just, go to ChatGPT and sign up. And now you've got, your assistant there.
There's a
Can't be
reason
doing
why it's
that.
free.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. There's a reason why it's free.
Yeah.
Yep. You are the payment. So I think that's really good advice. And I think that's really where we have to be focusing. So let me ask you before we go, because I think this has been an absolutely fantastic and fun discussion. Can you tell everybody, where they can find out more about you and more about Lightcast?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Lightcast first. Lightcast's pretty easy to find, www.lightcast.io. You can find more information about the program that I've built there on trust.lightcast.io. Talks about certifications we have. We have some commonly asked questions and answers there, so that's pretty cool. The team loves it, and so do the sales guys. So a lot of fun building it out and with all the collaboration we've had. More about me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I house most of my data that I've gone through and vetted. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I generally try to keep that updated. I'm becoming much more engaging on there, and feel free to drop me a line if you have any questions there, and I'll try to get back to it as soon as I can.
I love it. Oh, and before we go, what about McCord Keystone Advisory?
Yeah, that is www.mccordkeystoneadvisory.com. I tried to make it as easy as possible.
There you go.
So you can reach out there. I have a website there. I'm going to continually improve that, but I have a contact spot if you want to know more about services we provide, and how we can help you.
Fantastic. Well, Greg, until next time.
Until next time, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.